reads just the titles of what I'm going to say versus the descriptions. Because the title for today is Get Curious About the Other Side, and I can't tell you how many of you came today hoping for a seance. And I'm sorry to disappoint. I didn't take the divination class at seminary. So if you came for a seance, it's going to have to be something a little less dramatic. It's the other side, as in those you don't agree with. This was very creative how this happened. About a month ago, Scott Rodman was in my office. I said, I've got this service, I'm thinking about it, and I was asking for his opinion because we've often talked about folks in town or organizations in town that he doesn't agree with, and I wanted to know how he handles it. Well, you know Scott, he's got a lot of passion for things, and he kind of got a lot of passion for this idea. And the next time I showed up, he goes, I've lined up 5 speakers for you. I'm like, okay, here we go. So I'm kind of curious how this is all going to unfold. So the speakers are both going to tell stories about what it's like to work on the other side, but it's curiosity about a bunch of different things. So some of it is just curiosity about who that person is and why they believe what they believe, or it could be curiosity about whether I should even enter into a dialogue with them and how to even go about it. And then sometimes it's just a curiosity about whether what I'm going to do, this conversation I'm going to have, is even going to make a difference. So some of these stories are personal, some of them are professional, some of them are about work life, some are about politics, some are about religion. So you're going to hear quite a variety of things. So I do have to make one adjustment though. Bob DeYoung at the last minute had to go out of town. So it'll be Scott Rodman, Lisetta Aldrich, Judy Goldsmith, John McDowell. And if we still have time, I'll tell yet another story. But we're very flexible in how this is going to work today. So we're going to do it like those of you that are of a certain age will know the Phil Donahue show. So we're going to bring the stools up to the front, and I'd ask all of our speakers to come up and sit, and then I will get to play Phil Donahue and have the microphone. So come on up.
Can I bring my coffee?
You can bring anything you want. Pets, advisors, anything.
I hope nobody minds being
Arrange them
recorded.
however you feel comfortable. You'd rather have a circle or something?
I'm kind of shook. I feel you, Lisetta.
There we go.
Put the muscle and hop up there.
So, like I said, the stories are all different things about curiosity and how they approached the other side of someone not agreeing with you or an organization not agreeing with you. So we're going to start with Scott on this end. All right?
Right. My story is about my relationship with my mother, and it ended in a kind of stalemate, but I think it's one way to handle a situation where you have some kind of disagreement or misunderstanding with another person. So my parents were both very conservative, and they voted that way. And I remember, my father's been dead quite a few years now, and I remember that I did have arguments with him about politics. And the last thing I remember was he mentioned he was going off about Ralph Nader and about how he should leave the corporations alone. And when he said that, when I heard it, I thought, why am I arguing with my dad? My dad's very old. He was not really well at that time. And I thought, it doesn't make sense. He's my dad, I love him, and so I just stopped. But I didn't really have a conversation with him about that. Then I had the privilege of living with my mom in her last 2 years, and so we started to talk about it, and I thought, no, I don't want to do this. So I talked to my mom, and I said, I don't want to argue with you about it. I don't want to change your mind. And so and she agreed, but she kind of just a little pecked at me every once in a while, I read something in the newspaper. And so that worked out pretty well. The last time she voted was in the Obama election, the first one, 2008. And I had the car, and I was thinking, I'll go vote, and then I'll come back, and I'll tell my mom, the car broke down, I can't get you out. I actually thought about this and how I would do it so she wouldn't catch on. And then I thought, the hell with that? Come on, this is my mom. And you know that I canvass and I do a lot, and my vote is I tell other people my vote is very important. And I thought, no, I'm so proud of my mom. She had her walker then, to be able to go with her to the polls and see her vote. So I went with her and was very proud. And I think that I didn't have any other conversation with her about that, but I think now I've learned a lot. And I think through curiosity and learning the skills I have learned, I would have talked to her and asked her why. And she did make one big change towards liberal thought, and so she was thinking, you know. So anyway, it was a good experience.
And thank you, Scott. And one thing I forgot to mention, normally I would have had the congregational response after you go get your cake and you bring it back. But today, because it's a panel and I thought you might want to ask them questions, we're going to have it immediately following this discussion. So we might get the cake a little bit later, sorry, Jane, but we'll get there, okay? All right, so kind of think of what you want to ask Scott in a few minutes. So Lucetta, you're next.
Okay, well, Scott came up and asked me, and I said yes. One of the things I learned a long time ago was that when people ask me to do things, I should say yes. And then later I thought about it, and I think I'm going to call Jim and say, I don't think this is such a good idea. Anyway, it's a work situation, and this goes back, and my memory is not the greatest on this, but it was in the 70s, early 70s, and my husband, I'll frame it around when he went to treatment. He had been sober for quite some time, and this was this pattern. And he'd be sober for a while and then fall off the wagon. This day he fell off the wagon. He was working for a car company, and he was out with a brand new car, drinking. It scared me to death because I was afraid he'd have a wreck with a new car, and he lost his job anyway. But nevertheless, we went to got him to treatment, and the man that was there was just a volunteer, and he was so kind to me. His name was Vince, and he was just so kind to me, and he made me feel so good about having Daryl stay there, and that this was a good place, and was a good place for him to be. And Vince was the state director of alcoholism for the state of South Dakota at that time. And so I was very impressed that this man, he spent a lot of time at the treatment center talking, and he's a recovering person himself. So I was very impressed with this man. Okay, now we'll go back about, forward several years. And I was working as a reporter for the newspaper in Mitchell. And I saw, we didn't have a lot of money. So Daryl was still getting his act together. He was back in college, finishing up. And I saw an ad in the paper to work for a community action agency for the elderly. And so I put in an application. The director called me and wanted to have lunch with me. And he said, Lucetta, he says, you are the perfect person to take over the Alcoholism and Drug Referral Center in Mitchell. And I said, well, how do you figure that? Because no background other than my own personal stuff. And he says, well, that's the ticket, he says, because I just was at a conference, and this was when money was coming available for alcoholism treatment, and I'd be honest, nobody knew really what they were doing in the field back in the 70s. They really didn't. And he said, they told us at this conference that Al-Anon folks were a group that should be looked toward. And the fact that I had a degree, the position had been open for a year. They couldn't find anyone to take the directorship of this program. Now, this covered about a third of the state of South Dakota. It was a big territory. And so I agreed. I took the job. And he said, we will get training for you. And that is I was going to say, this was the best of times, the worst of times. And Daryl was working in another program in another city, in Madison, and they also sent him to the University of Utah for chemical dependency treatment training. And both of us were able to go and get that certification. That was the great part of the whole thing, and it was a marvelous program, and it was worked for him because he could use the credits toward his degree. So it was just a wonderful opportunity. So keep forward. I didn't get any they promised to be real mentors to me. They weren't. But one of the ladies that worked in the program was very helpful to me, and she was going on to, she was leaving, and she had been very helpful to us as far as recovery went, and she was helpful to me in the program, to put the program together, and it was working really, I thought, quite well. I had a good reputation. I had done a lot in the community, and the community was very supportive, and I had a good relationship with the tribe and the BIA, and I was really pleased with how things were going. So anyway, I came back from one of the training sessions, and I had a certified letter saying that they were going to change my position. I would no longer be the director. I'd be a coordinator. I kept my money, but they were making one of my staff become the director at Lake Andes, where the Community Action Agency actually had their big office. And they were going to just have me as a coordinator just in Mitchell. There were some nice things about that for me as a young mom, and and my husband in college and everything. And I thought, oh, well, all right. Well, then I was told the reason was they were going to get a $10,000 grant if they got that woman out of that job and that position, because they did not want any women, or especially women who were not alcoholics, being directors of a program in the state of South Dakota. When I found that out, I got mad. And I went and talked to one of the board members at the Community Action Agency. I showed him the letter. I said, "This is what's happening. You can get rid of me for $10,000. Basically, is what's happening." And so I had a meeting with the director and of the agency, and the guy that was going to replace me. And the guy that was going to replace me, he hated it. He said, "This isn't right. It shouldn't happen. I'm not qualified." And he was just a wreck. So anyway, and that was really the downside. So, but anyway, the board defended me. They said, "No, we're not going to be blackmailed by the state division for a $10,000 grant. You don't have any personnel issues with Lucetta. It is not happening." So then we had to go back to the table with I had to go back to the director. Intermittently, the poor man who they were going to make the director got drunk. He was so devastated by all of this. Not that he didn't get the director position, but he felt like they were throwing me under the bus, and he was a part of it, and he felt really horrible. So in the end, I ended up taking him to treatment. But anyway, the directors, they came in and they said, "We're really sorry. This has been a really learning experience for us, and we really resolved it in a good way." And they felt they had learned from it, and it was never that they were against me, but it's hard to get money for drug and alcohol programs, and they really wanted that $10,000. And that doesn't sound like much now, but in the 70s, it was still quite a bit of money. So, with that, I'll stop.
So when Lucetta and I were talking about this, I said, well, the curiosity part to me was at the time, and Lucetta, so she probably didn't even think about speaking up, but I probably would have put myself in her shoes, and given the sexism that occurred back in the 70s in South Dakota in particular, it's like, well, should I just let it be, kind of thing. So kind of a curiosity about your own gumption and whether you should speak out or not, like our story earlier. So now I'm going to move to John, if you want to go next, please. I'm kind of doing male, female, but.
Oh, okay.
There you go.
Okay.
So Scott called me about this, and he said the idea is, well, one of the things was you are curious about the other side, and specifically if you have success in establishing connections, communication, in spite of certain headwinds. And I said, well, can I talk about failure too? Because there is successes. And what I really wanted to say about that is generally for me, and probably this is true for most of you, most of our successes are in fact preceded by a good amount of failure. And I think the value of failure is, oh, I'm a failure, I'm a loser, and we beat up on ourselves, but actually, what an opportunity to try again, to pick yourself up. For me, my story about this involved my teaching days. And there are several teachers in the classroom, and we talk about this, that every school year is a new opportunity, a second chance, a third chance. 13 years ago, Jeannie and I were still living near Kaiserslautern, Germany. I was working at a military base school overseas. But I had those middle school kids, those 8th graders, those sullen, moody adolescents. And what was the other side is the teacher on one side of the desk in front of 25 or 30 sullen, moody adolescents. And the key was, over the years, of course, many failures, many attempts to reach out, many times when you kind of lose control. And this is a good group. This is what many of these kids like to see, is to get under the teacher's skin and get them excited, and then you're, oh, I just gave that one away. So my experience was, and I think it just translates into everything, is hit the pause button first. Listen a little bit. And then if you get into a conflict, try to find it somewhere within you to forgive. In this case, it would be some very angry kid, and who knows what stories behind that angry kid who's in that bad mood. The wonderful thing about that age group, it bubbles right to the surface. There's no attempt to hide it. And I wasn't always good, but I tried to say, if I had a run-in with a kid, if I had to send the kid out to the principal's office or whatever, when the kid would return the next day, I'd say, I'm sorry we had this issue yesterday. I just want you to know, I think we can move on from this. Say something. The fig leaf goes a long way. I think the kid thinks, he's going to hate me forever, so I'll hate him back forever. And towards the end of my career, I just found that it just got easier over time as we get to be older and wiser. I think that helps. One of the guidance counselors said, you don't have that many problems with your kids. And I said, I think it's going well. He said, well, you have a way of getting them on your side. And I thought, oh, I like that. That's my story.
Okay. Well, I am, as you know, very immersed in politics. I watch political television all the time. I read political books. That always depressed me. Currently, I'm reading the Mueller report. And some time back, I felt that I needed to have some balance in my life, something not political. For a while, quite a while, I danced, and that was good, because dancing people don't talk politics at all, so that was great. But what I did get into, I'm not dancing much anymore, but I'm still working with a scrapbooking group, one morning a week, 3 weeks a month. And these are very nice ladies, and we have a lot of fun. And we help each other, and we say, do you have this shade of blue, or what do you think about this page? How does it look? We help each other, and it's a lot of fun. We do not talk politics. I know from the bumper sticker, the bumper sticker on one of the ladies' cars, that this would not be a good place to talk politics. And I didn't want to, so that was fine. But one time it was after one of the first major appearances of the Black Lives Matter movement on television. And they got to talking about that, and one of the ladies said, well, all lives matter. And everybody said, yes, all lives matter. And I thought, oh, do I really want to get into this? And I thought, oh, I can't let this go. I have to take the shot. So I said, the truth of the matter is, I mean, it goes without saying that all lives matter. We know that. All lives matter, of course. But the truth of the matter is that if we're honest about it, we have to admit that black lives haven't ever mattered to us. Certainly not enough to do anything about the issues that concern them. And they all kind of went, and sadly at that point somebody came to the door and called me, wanted to talk to me, so I had to leave. When I came back, everything was nice, everybody was very nice to me. But we didn't talk about the subject again. But I thought, well, at least hopefully I planted a seed. And it was hard to take that leap, because this is a nice group, and you know, I look forward to it. But it at least didn't hurt. So I'm hoping that that was a positive step in a good direction. Nobody ever brought up that subject again, but I have to add to this briefly about my brother John, who I have in the past referred to as my fascist brother. And the label fit all too well. Very, very rigid, very authoritarian, extremely Catholic. And by that I don't mean to put down Catholicism, because there are many different kinds. John's is of the kind that resides almost entirely in the brain, not in the heart. And he sent me an editorial a couple days ago that was a new take on the Apostle Paul, because Paul had said that grace is achieved and you get salvation not through good works, but through grace, the grace of God. So you can help people all you want, help the poor, feed the needy, you know, that doesn't do any good unless you admit your original sin and, you know, I'm sorry, I can't relate to that. My religion is based in my heart. But previous to that, this all kind of happened because Friday morning, I have a ritual Friday morning breakfast, and I went to the drugstore to pick up the Milwaukee Journal to read, and I got to the store, to the restaurant, and discovered that I had picked up instead the Wall Street Journal, which was major culture shock, but that's another story. But at any rate, John and I have been talking, and we really are becoming friends. This is remarkable to me, because at one point in our lives, I did not talk to John. We did not talk for 20 years. I mean, this was a major breach. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. What brought us back together initially was our mother's death, because we were able, fortunately, all 5 of us, her children, to be together for most of the time, her last several days, and that was really wonderful. And that kind of opened the door. So it was still some time after that before we talked, but recently my sister Carol told me that John, who is on dialysis and is 86, was talking about going off dialysis because he just really hated it. And that seemed to signal, you know, that he was sort of giving up. And certainly that was a major part of my motivation. But I texted him and said, hey, could I come and see you sometime? Just drop in on a Saturday morning and visit with you and Artis, who is his new wife. She's a wonderful person. And he said, sure. I know it. So I visited with him. We got to talking politics. We didn't avoid politics. We got into it. And most of it was not successful. It was not. And we yelled at each other a lot. But Artis sat there and she said, okay, I am the moderator. And if you have any serious disagreement, you raise your hand and I will talk and we'll work it out. Artis was wonderful. And we yelled at each other quite a lot. And then we'd laugh and then we'd talk about it some more. And left that day, and he gave me such a big hug. One of the greatest things that is happening is John is laughing. I haven't heard John laugh. I can't tell you the last time I heard John laugh. And we laugh a lot now, and we talk on the telephone, we text, we email. But I got into it by saying to John, when I went there that first Saturday morning, please help me to understand you. You're my brother, and I love you. And you tick me off really bad sometimes. But I love you, and I want to understand you, because I know you to be a smart man, fundamentally a good person, even if I disagree with practically everything you think. But help me understand. And from that beginning, we started to build. And he's still, I mean, all you have to do is look at that Wall Street Journal. And, I said to him, after I read that, I said, you and I do live in two different worlds. You know that. Your diet of news and information is Fox News and the Wall Street Journal. And mine is MSNBC and the Unitarian Church, which he doesn't really accept as a church, but that's another story. But it is getting back together, finding each other, opening the door with love. And I'm getting the best hugs from him now. It's really wonderful. And he laughs on the telephone, and that makes me happier than anything I can imagine.
Thank you very much. So you've heard 4 stories about folks that were curious in one way, shape, or form on how to reconcile with someone who didn't agree with them. And we've got about 4 more minutes, and so I thought I'd open it up if any of you want to ask any of them questions at all. All right.
Listening to the 4 of you, I think